And now I'm going to start talking to you. So I'm going to be talking to you about the Canadian Cow-Calf Survey, which is a survey we did a year and a half ago. Got all the results in, crunched them over the course of the last year, and we've got some preliminary results. So I'm going to tell you about what the results were, put a little bit of emphasis on what the Ontario-specific results were. So had a couple of questions about the BCRC. So we periodically run into people who think the BCRC is a government organization, and we're not. We're an industry organization, and we are funded by you through your national checkoff. So Ontario's paying a dollar in the national checkoff. There's going to be some discussion about that at the upcoming BFO AGM if you're there. But anyway, national checkoff, you pay. And that is what funds us to do research. It funds Canada Beef to do their marketing and promotion, and it funds public and stakeholder initiatives to reach out to consumers. Now, our job at the BCRC is to do research and extension that'll help our industry become more competitive and more sustainable. All of the dollars that we're spending are your dollars. They're all producer dollars. And so it's producers who are making the funding decisions. So we've got a board of producers from across the country that are making all those funding decisions. Here is our board right now. Your Ontario reps, actually Ron Stevenson is stepping away, sadly enough. But there's plenty more great producers where he came from, so looking forward to a new rep from Ontario. And Kim Jo Bliss has joined us too. So we've got great representation from Ontario. So our cow-calf survey, this was a survey we did. It was an online survey that we ran. Again, it was fall of 2023 to spring of 2024 when that survey was open, and we were asking producers about a whole range of production and management practices for the calf crop from the year before. And so I'm going to talk about some of the key findings and opportunities that came out of this for Ontario, and I'm going to point out some of the resources that we've developed that your checkoff is funded that'll help you achieve that. So I was kind of curious about our response rate. So there's about 60,000 beef producers in Canada. There were 600 that responded to our survey. So about 1% of producers responded to our survey. And I thought that's kind of small. So then I looked at I think this is an Ipsos Reid survey about, it doesn't matter what this is about, but it is about what are you worried about as a Canadian. So here in this survey, they're trying to get a sense of what 40 million Canadians are worried about. And to do that, they surveyed 1,000 people. So we got 60,000. We've surveyed 600. Here, they're looking for the attitudes of 40 million, and they surveyed 1,000. And so they've got a much smaller sample that gave them a statistically representative sample. So we're pretty confident that our response rate is representative. A little bit more ammunition there as we compared our survey responses to the Census of Ag. 15% of the producers that responded to our survey were from Ontario, and there's Ontario producers are 16% of Canada, so that's pretty similar. And similarly with the number of cows, the 5.6% of the cows that were represented in our survey are from Ontario, and it's right almost identical to the Ontario beef cow population as a percent of the whole country. And so then I started thinking, I'm talking to a bunch of producers in Ontario who are taking time out of their evening to hear presentations. You are not run-of-the-mill producers. You're probably the upper end of producers. And so I'm really hoping that when I talk about the average Ontario producer, that I'm not boring you. And so I Googled bored farmers, and this is the image that came up. These guys are pretty bored. And so it's always kind of a struggle giving a presentation like this, because you're pretty aware that the audience is probably pretty progressive, right? You're on a webinar like this, so you can find information about how to make your operation better. So the results I'm going to present may not describe you. They describe the average producer. And you might look at some of these results and think, well, that's not me, but it might be your neighbor. And producers learn in a lot of different ways, and a lot of them learn from other producers. So knowing what your neighbors are up to might help in some of those conversations, but hopefully there's something in here for you too. And what have I got here? This is a QR code. So I've got these scattered all through my presentation. So if you want to, you can take pictures of these as I go through and take a picture of it, hit the little yellow box, and it'll take you to the part of our website that I'm referring to. This one will take you to our home page. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter already, it's going to ask you if you want to. And then if you do, you'll get updates every time we come out with new information for you. So I'm going to show you a whole bunch of graphs. The results, a lot of them are going to show cows and heifers. The cows are in blue. The heifers are going to be in orange. The national average is always going to be over on the left. And I'll draw a blue line across to show the average for the cows, and an orange line across to show the average for the heifers. And then all the provinces are going to show up in the middle. And so what this one is telling us is that Ontario has a bit longer breeding season than the national average for both cows and for heifers. And so a longer breeding season, of course, gives you the opportunity to have less uniform calves when it comes time to sell them in fall. And those less uniform calves generally bring lower prices. And it also means that your heifer calves are going to have more opportunities to be born later in the calving season and have less time to develop before they get exposed to the bull if you're keeping them as potential replacements. So that's something to think about. Now, in terms of the ideal breeding season length is 63 days. The idea there being that a cow needs to rebreed within 63 days in order to maintain a 365-day calving interval. And if the breeding season is longer, cows can calve later and later each year and wean lighter and lighter calves. And Ontario's well below the national average here. Less than a quarter of Ontario's producers have a breeding season shorter than 63 days, so there's room to improve there. Now, a longer breeding season, of course, gives your cows and heifers more opportunities to get bred, and a late calf is worth a lot more than no calf. But that 63-day breeding season, or that'll give you a more uniform calf crop, and that is going to be more valuable. That is really achievable with good nutritional management, good body condition scores, and fertile bulls. So you wouldn't need those extra opportunities to get bred with additional cycles. Now, again, that longer calving season does allow more opportunities for cows to get bred, and so Ontario does have lower open rates than the Canadian average, as you might expect, which is good. Lower open rates, though, can be achieved even with that shorter breeding season when you've got good nutrition, good body condition scores, good animal health, and good bull power. So we'll show you some tools we've got that can help address some of those things. Now, long breeding season, try to keep up here. Long breeding season means a longer calving season as well, especially for the cows. Ontario heifers also had, they are right on the national average in terms of they had a long breeding season, but they had perfectly average calving season. So that tells me that they're getting bred early in the breeding season. And that tells me that they're being well managed, especially on the nutrition side. And so that you could do the same thing with the cow herd. You could get those cows bred in a tight calving season or a tight breeding season and shorten up your calving season, get more uniform calf crop. So there's I think a real opportunity there. Now, knowing these stats is one thing. Improving them is another. Reproductive and weaning performance are all intertwined, and they're all rooted in nutritional management and herd management and health and all the rest of it. And paying attention to the basics is going to support your bottom line. So going to start showing you some tools that you could potentially use if you're concerned about some of these things on your operation. Now, we've developed quite a few resources to demonstrate the benefits and the how-tos of good production practices. We do webinars where we'll pair a research expert with a producer who will lay out how they, so the expert will say, here's the theory, here's the science behind why you should have a 63-day calving or breeding season, and then we'll pair them with a producer who said, and here's how I made that work on my operation. And then we've always got a Q&A where you have an opportunity to ask them how they do it. One of the things that this one's kind of an interesting story. This guy in the bottom right is he's a rancher from the foothills, but the reason this webinar came about was we put out a blog post sometime in 23, I think, saying, you should breed your heifers 60 days before the cows, because heifers are after they've calved, they're still growing. They're going to take a little bit longer to recover and cycle again to get rebred. And if you breed the heifers, early the first time, that you give them longer runway to rebreed the second year. And this blog post came out at 10 in the morning. At about 10:05, Stephen called me and said, that's nonsense, and I'll tell you why. And so he gave me his lecture on why he thinks that's a bad management practice for him. And so we said, well, that's an interesting perspective. Let's do a webinar to talk about other ways that you can raise heifers for reproductive success. So the point is, if you we put out stuff all the time. If you think that what we're putting out is completely wrong, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always looking for different ways for producers to reach the same end. All right, let's talk a little bit about health. I won't spend a ton of time on this, but Ontario's right on the national average in terms of vaccinating the cow herd, maybe a little bit better. But the thing that concerns me here is that there's still around 30% of producers across the country who don't routinely vaccinate their cows. And when we ask, well, why don't you vaccinate your cows for reproductive disease? The top two reasons were pretty troubling. The first one was, well, I got a closed herd, and I bet you don't. If you buy bulls, or if you lease bulls, or if you borrow bulls, or if you buy heifers, or if you use a community pasture, or if you share a fence line with a neighbor, or if anybody comes in with a feed truck or walks through the place, or if you got wildlife, you don't have a closed herd. There are no end of opportunities for diseases to come in contact with your herd. And so we've got a whole bunch of resources on our website around biosecurity, but this is one of the reasons that vaccination is so important, right? It's insurance, and not vaccinating is like not buying house insurance because your house is not currently on fire, right? Insurance will not prevent house fires, but it'll greatly reduce the upheaval that you'll face if you have one. Just the same way vaccines won't prevent all diseases, they won't prevent them, but they will reduce the risk, and they will reduce the how bad the disease gets. Similar thing with I'm happy with conception rates, right? You'll be happy with conception rates until a disease comes in, and then you won't be so happy anymore. So that's the insurance thing again. Again, we got a ton of resources around vaccination. Again, these are free for you to use. You pay checkoff, you paid the dollars it took to develop these. They're free to use. Help yourself. So we've got decision trees. We got tools to help figure out the cost benefit of vaccinating for various diseases, all sorts of information on how to handle vaccines, how to transport them and store them and mix them and administer them, and all the rest of it. We asked about 500 questions, but one of them was we asked about body condition scoring. because of course that's one of the simplest and most reliable, practical indicators of how much fat reserve a cow is carrying, and it's strongly linked to both nutritional status as well as reproductive performance. So it's an important thing to monitor. Now, the good news is that looking at the gray bar, most producers across the country are pretty aware that body condition scoring is body condition is an important thing to pay attention to. But what's concerning is that most of them are not using hands-on body condition scoring, regardless of the province. Ontario's right on the average, but most people are relying on visual appraisal and not on hands-on. What's really concerning, actually, and it was the worst in Ontario, is that there's just about 20% of the producers who responded to our survey who said, I don't pay any attention to this at all, which that's concerning to me. We asked, why don't you use hands-on body condition scoring? And the common impression is that your eyeball is as good as your hands, and your eyeball is not as good as your hands. It's a lot less accurate to look at them than to feel them. That's especially true when they're a long ways away. It's especially true when they're black cattle in the shade, when they have long hair, or when they're really pregnant. It's really easy to confuse a black, hairy, pregnant cow that's thin with one that's actually fat. So visual appraisal is really not good enough. And so you don't have to run them through the chute separately just to evaluate body condition, but if you're putting them through the chute anyhow, to put Ivomec on or to vaccinate them or what have you, reach out and touch them, see what they feel like. And we've got tools on our website for how to do it. Tools to demonstrate the economic benefit of putting a bit more condition on your cows. So if you move, and Maddie was talking about this as well, if you move from a body condition score of 2, which is on the thin side, up to an average herd body condition score of 3, you'll see all manner of benefits. You're going to see better pregnancy rates. You're going to see shorter calving intervals. They'll start to cycle sooner, and more of them will be cycling sooner. You'll have a shorter postpartum interval, better weaning weights, better calf growth rates, less abortions, less stillbirths, less death loss, less severe dystocia. And probably the clincher is that if you had a 100 cow herd and you sold them for $3 a pound, the next year, if you improve your body condition score at today's calf prices, putting that extra body condition score on would be worth about $35,000 over that 100 cow herd. We've got videos to demonstrate here's how you do this. And again, if you follow that QR code, it'll take you to all those resources. Now, one thing I didn't mention is that we've got a bunch of tools that'll also help you figure out, okay, well, if I want to increase my herd body condition score from 2 to 3, here's how much feed it's going to take. And if you put in your feed options and prices, you can figure out here's how much it's going to cost to get my herd back up to that body condition score, and then start to look at the cost benefit. Now, feed testing, of course, is a big part of that. And feed testing in Ontario is below the national average. But the national average is less than 50, and so there's room to improve everywhere across the country. And of course, feed quality is not consistent from year to year. It varies with growing conditions and weathering and the source of the feed, you name it. So last year's feed test will not tell you anything about this year's feed. We asked people about why don't you test your feed, and well, my cows seem healthy. Is kind of dangerous. There have been really well documented cases of situations where herds of cows have been in great body condition and on like lush green grass and really great clear well water, and ended up with like 70% open rates. Looks can be misleading. In that case, it was because they had a major copper deficiency that they were not aware of on a pasture they'd never used before. The only way you're going to find out about that is testing your feed. Cost benefits a bit misleading. It may turn out that your feed may be worth. It may have incredibly high quality. It may have much higher quality than your cattle need. And so in that case, you might be a lot better off selling that feed to a horse guy or maybe a dairy guy and buying less costly feed that's closer to what your cattle do need. Or, sell some of that good feed and blend it with some lower quality feed that Maddie's generating with her feed grinder, right? Or use the information to figure out, okay, my early in gestation, nutrient requirements aren't so great, so I can feed the lousier stuff then and save the good stuff for later in gestation when they need better nutrition and have a harder time getting it into them. I don't know what to do with the results. That's valid enough. So we developed some tools to help you figure out how to interpret a feed analysis and what to do with the results. And all of those things can be accessed for free on our website. Put all sorts of nutritional information together. So we've got a webinar online. Of course, it's on YouTube. All these things are saved on YouTube because we run these things. Yeah, typically in the early evening my time, which is in Alberta, which means it's a little late for you guys, but all of these things show up on YouTube, so you can look at them anytime you want to. But got a webinar about the ABCs of feed testing, why you should do it, how to collect the samples, and how to demystify the feed analyses. If you get a feed test and you look at it and it's just a bunch of numbers that you don't understand and a bunch of abbreviations that don't make sense, and you stick it in the drawer, that feed test doesn't do you very much good. So we developed this tool to help evaluate feed test results where you can enter, well, what kind of cattle are you feeding? What kind of gain are you looking for? So, the options here would be, well, they're wean calves or they're, replacement heifers or their cows early in gestation or bulls, what have you. Enter the weight, enter your feed test data, just some of the key numbers: dry matter, TDN, protein, calcium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium. Click this button and it'll turn all these numbers either green if they're good, or yellow if they're kind of borderline, or red if it's, you know what, you need to call Katie Wood right now because you got a problem with this feed. So it's a tool to help identify some of the red flags that you want to keep an eye on. So we all often think about energy and protein. Those are essential. So are minerals and vitamins. Ontario is the nation's leader in terms of supplementing these things on a year-round basis. So well done. Of those who do supplement, most of you supplement year-round. Others are a little more strategic in terms of when they deliver them. It's going to vary from operation to operation. Most people deliver minerals and vitamins free choice, which is easy. It might be a little different in Ontario, but in the West, certainly it's typically mineral blocks or mineral tubs, mineral feeders. And the problem with free choice is that one may choose to eat mineral and that one may choose not to eat mineral. And so it's really hard to guarantee that everybody's getting what they need. And the way to do that really is with a total mixed ration. If you feed a total mixed ration, they're gonna get what you deliver to them, and it helps to avoid mineral deficiencies and toxicities because those are both bad for health, fertility. Again, we got tools. In some cases, chelated minerals might be the right choice, especially if you're an area that has I got the wrong slide or picture on here. I do have versions that go all the way to the East Coast. Copper deficiency and molybdenum, high molybdenum, and especially when you get the two of them together, you can have real problems. High sulfur also causes problems, and these things are a problem all across the country. But again, talking to a nutritionist can save you money, either by avoiding a nutritional problem or by avoiding paying for a supplement that you might not need. We've got resources about trace minerals as well. One of the more recent things we've added is a podcast. We're not as ambitious with our podcasts as some people are. Really, what we do is these are recordings of our written material. So if you're too busy driving around or checking cows or what have you to read the stuff we put out, now you can drive around and check cows and listen to the stuff that we put out. We have started offering a ration balancing program called Cow Bites. This was originally developed by Alberta Agriculture and then Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture, but it's good nationwide, good continent-wide, as a matter of fact. Now, we inherited this when Alberta Agriculture went out of business. And this is the only thing that we charge for it. Everything on our website is free except for this. We charge $60 for this just because, well, a couple of reasons. One is that we're mailing out, computer sticks to load it on your computer. So we got to cover that shipping and handling, but mainly because software needs to be upgraded whenever Katie improves our knowledge around nutritional requirements of different kinds of beef cattle. These things need to be upgraded. So we're budgeting for that. And also that thing about mailing these sticks around, that's a nuisance. What we want to do ultimately is turn this into a web-based thing, and so that it's way simpler to distribute and to automatically update it. So once you buy it, we can automatically update it rather than having to mail you a new stick every time. So anyway, got this. And you can find it quite easily. Oh, getting cows to breed and calve is kind of one step, but the calf also has to survive, and so we asked about pre-weaning death loss. And not surprisingly, death losses are higher in heifers than they are in cows. And Ontario's got actually the lowest death loss for calves born to cows, but you got just about the highest for calves born to heifers. Now remember these numbers for a second. So they're like 4% death loss from birth to weaning in calves born to cows, and just over, well, let's say 7.5% for calves that are born to heifers. So 4 and 7.5. Let's try to remember that for a second. That was the pre-weaning total death loss. But most of that death loss, so just over 4% of calves born to cows die before weaning, that's almost all happening in the first 24 hours. And 4% out of 7.5% of the calves born to heifers are dying in the first 24 hours. And so it's not like they're dying on a regular basis from birth to weaning. That death is happening in the first day for the most part. If a calf's gonna die, it's probably gonna die within the first day or two. And so, newborn calves are kind of a nuisance to deal with, but when they're worth what they are, it's probably worth the effort to save them, even if you decide not to keep that heifer calf as a replacement, or if you do decide to cull that cow at the end of the year. A calf that survives to weaning is worth an awful lot more than one that dies in the first day of life. So we've developed some pretty practical resources about how to identify and how to save those ailing calves. It's this whole batch information we've got called Calf 911. There's loads of stuff. If you go to our website, beefresearch.ca, there's a search box, search for Calf 911. You'll find no end of resources that'll be useful at this time of year. What am I doing now? Oh, we'll talk about parasite control. So the vast majority of producers are using parasite control, external, internal, both. But there's this really small minority across the whole country that don't. And so we dug into that a little bit. So this next slide is only about this 5% or so of producers who do not use parasite control. Maybe that's you. But we asked, why don't you? And the big reason that people don't use parasite control is that they're worried, for the most part, about soil microbe health. And I don't really know what that means, but I suspect it's partly about concern for dung beetles. And so I looked into that a bit. Now, this is not our book. This is a book that was written by Agriculture Canada by a guy named Kevin Float, who works out of Lethbridge. And I asked him about this question about are parasite control treatments bad for dung beetles? And here's what he told me. He said parasite treatments can affect dung beetles, but so can a lot of other things. So drought can affect them, and you know, horrible winter conditions can affect them. Turning all your pasture land into crops can affect them. So parasite treatments can affect them. So can a lot of other things. But whether that effect on the parasites has a measurable impact on manure breakdown and nutrient cycling isn't as clear. The other thing that's important to remember is that the insect suppression from products like Ivomec last for like 4 to 5 months, right? They have a residual that lasts for 4 to 5 months, but they're like an antibiotic. They don't stick around forever. That's why you need to treat animals each time they get sick, right? So the timing of application is important, and if you apply it in fall, it's probably, or early winter, that the residues probably won't be getting excreted and affecting the dung beetles the next grazing season. So anyway, don't think it's a major concern. We've got some research underway to look into that a little bit further, but we'll update you as we get results on that. But in the meantime, we do have a bunch of resources to help producers better manage internal and external parasites and parasite control products, including a really great webinar from this guy, John Gilliard from University of Calgary. And he's pretty passionate about parasites and how you can manage the way you treat parasites to slow the development of resistance and selective treatment. If your cows are in great condition and have a good hair coat, there's a pretty good chance they don't have a bunch of parasites. So maybe they don't need to be treated. That'll slow the development of resistance and save you some money. And there you go. You can find resources on that. I'm getting close to the end here, but I want to hang on tight. I'm going to take a hard left here. I'm going to talk a little bit about social sustainability, which is all about supporting consumer confidence and beef demand. Animal care is one of the aspects of social sustainability. And, we'll see activist groups like PETA. So this is not my slide. This is not from our website. This is PETA. And they say things like when still very young, many cows are branded, burned with hot irons. They're dehorned. Their horns are gouged out or cut or burnt off and castrated. Their testicles are ripped out of their scrotums, all without painkillers. So we asked some questions around, how do you manage things like this on the farm? And what's really interesting is that our survey kind of puts the lie to most of this. And here's why I'm going to say this. Our survey told us that over a third of producers have adopted pain control for castration. Ontario is right up there among the nation's leaders, and that's really good news for our industry. And the reason that's such good news is that those drugs are really new. 10 years ago, there were none. And when we did our very first survey back in 2014, they were just starting to come on the market, and hardly anyone was aware of them, and hardly anyone was using them, and nobody in Ontario said they were using them. The last time we did this survey, it had jumped up to a quarter of producers, and now it's over 50%. So pat yourselves on the back. You're doing the right thing here, because it's the right thing to do. You're not weaning any more pounds of calf because of this. There is not a clear economic incentive. There are some management benefits, but you're doing this purely to make your calves feel better, and you should feel better about this yourself. So this is great news. Dehorning is an even better story, because hardly any calves need to be dehorned anymore, right? The easiest way to dehorn calves is to listen to Aaron and buy polled bulls. and poll genetics have really made their way across the country, except in the most exceptional provinces of Alberta and Quebec. We like to be distinct. So not very many calves need to be dehorned, but pain meds have caught on here as well, right? So back in 2014, same story, hardly anyone was using them. It really jumped by 2017, and now we're up to like 90% in Atlantic Canada, over 60% in the West. Again, there's no production benefit to doing this. It's a benefit for the calf, and you're doing it for the right reasons, not because it's economically beneficial. It's inexpensive, to be clear. And again, we got some resources on pain control if that's new to you, and if you're interested, you can look there, find out more. I asked you about implanting. Hardly anyone implants, is what you guys said at the start of this the webinar. And getting ahead of myself here. On average, about 20% of producers across the country implanted their calves. It's really low in Ontario, around 5%, which is even lower than what you guys indicated on the survey at the start of this webinar. And so that means that there are 3/4 of producers across the country who do not use implants, and 95% of Ontario producers don't use implants. So if that's you, it's an opportunity worth considering. And we ask, why don't you implant? Here's the reasons we get. It could probably talk about the rest. I could talk about this for the rest of the night, but you're probably tired of hearing about it, or hearing from me anyway. But bottom line is, an implant costs about $2. It'll give you at least 10 extra pounds of weaning weight, at least, probably a lot more. And when each pound of weaning weight is worth another $3 or $4, that's an easy 20-to-1 return on investment, probably higher. Implants are a big opportunity for a lot of producers. We don't have a whole ton of information on our website about implanting. That was kind of an oversight. We assume that this technology is so old, everybody knows what they need to know about implants, but maybe it's worth developing some information. So we're starting to do that. And partly this implants kind of a controversial thing. If you're open to the idea, really think about it, because the economics are clear. The safety for both animals and humans is absolutely clear. There's no concerns. It's a real overlooked opportunity for a lot of producers all across the country. Anyway, I'm just about at the end here. I wanted to thank those of you who participated in this survey for doing so. You guys get blitzed with surveys all the time. There is survey overload and survey fatigue, and we really appreciate you responding to the ones that we put out. And hopefully you see some value in the information that's coming out of them as well. We certainly see value in this information because we're going to use it for two things. Partly looking at all these various graphs will help us know how to focus our extension efforts on what topics in what parts of the country, but it also helps us identify where some of the information gaps exist, and well, I guess implanting is clearly one of them, and it'll also help inform some of our research priorities too. So anyway, that is the end. Those are some of the highlights of the survey for Ontario, some of the resources we've got for you to use. I do want to point out that developing those resources is a big group effort, and OMAFRA and the U of Guelph folks are really instrumental in putting them together. So anyway, thanks again. Thanks for your time.